Hi everybody and welcome to tonight's episode of Grumpy Old Men. I'm Pinky and we have Greg as always, and we've got a few fantastic topics today. Well, fantastic's probably not the best choice of words, but we've got quite a big topic to unpack with Alice Springs' most recent riot. And I say most recent because for those of you that aren't paying attention, it's not the first and it probably won't be the last. And we've also got a couple of movies to look at later on.
Just one.
Okay.
But this main topic on what's happening in Alice Springs is a big one.
It absolutely is.
It's very close to us because we're in Australia as well.
Yep.
And this has been something that's been going on for a very long time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely has. So if you haven't been paying attention to the media, about a week ago we had another big riot in Alice Springs where houses were set on fire, cars were set on fire. There's about 150 kids running in the streets. Started a big confrontation with the local police, and it ended up in a curfew, 14-day curfew. So yeah, quite an eventful day. But there's quite a history to this. It's not a new thing in Alice Springs. It's a very common thing. A lot of people think that this is just one big explosion. This has been going on for decades. It's certainly not new.
Correct. It's been going for many years, but it really got a lot of media attention early last year because it really peaked to a really high crime rate.
Yeah.
We're just going to jump onto YouTube here, and I'll show you this little video back from 8 months ago. So what's that? In July last year. And that's when it really hit the news. Everyone started talking about it. Jacinta Price, who happens to be a minister from Alice Springs,
correct.
She really tried to get a lot of attention to it because it's an issue that needs to be solved. So just some of you international viewers that don't know what's going on, let's have a look at this video.
Filming CCTV. I don't know whether you're watching this incident down here on the corner of Todd and Gregory. Come running with the rocks and stolen cars and and for their safety and their group's safety. That's the right thing to do. But we can't even do with what we're trying.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. And with two of us,
they've all gone inside.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Shifts in their life.
She's a tough little cookie.
Yeah, I know.
You don't take no
And you say nice as well. You're always feeding the kids and feeding us, and
No,
you know,
no, don't feel bad.
and this kind of stuff happens. It's ridiculous. I feel really sorry for you.
There was hundreds of them that night running around just destroying absolutely everything. Anything they could get their hands on. You saw early they were throwing, I think it was garbage bins into the windscreens of cars.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of devastation.
Yeah, well, the one from last week, the emergency services were so overwhelmed that there were a couple of fires, houses set on fire and a couple of cars set on fire. And the only thing that managed to stop that was rain. Because the emergency services were so overwhelmed they couldn't do anything about it. But this goes right back to, well, it goes back decades, but probably the most recent sort of high-profile points to all of this, it goes back to probably about 2007. There was a report, you'll have to bear with me while I remember the name. So it was the Little Children Are Sacred report, which was an investigation into child abuse in Aboriginal communities. And so that report was done in 2007, where they found that something like 60 or 70% of Aboriginal households, the children were abused sexually, physically, drugs, alcohol, neglect. It was really a bad time. And it got to a point where they brought the Army and the ADF into Alice Springs to try and get everything under control. They banned alcohol. The government pledged something like $3.4 billion towards funding for youth.
Did that money actually get there?
Yeah, they did. So that came in 2012, but it was a 10-year plan, right? So through that period, so from 2007 up to 2012, and then when the funding came in, and then right up to 2022, we had about 15 years where there was almost no alcohol. So in 2022, the funding ended because it was a 10-year plan, and then all of a sudden you've introduced not free in price-wise, but freedom of alcohol back into the community, and it just started all over again. So it's been an ongoing problem for many, many years, but it's escalated again over the last few years particularly. So 2022 saw a 58% increase in crime in Alice Springs in 1 year. And that was the year that all of a sudden alcohol was no longer banned. So the last year's had an 18% increase on top of that. So the statistics are just mind-blowing. But, you speak to the youth workers and what have you in those communities, particularly Alice Springs and a couple of communities in WA and Queensland, and they'll tell you that most of this stems back to the family environment because, the parents are drunk, they're on drugs, they have no interest in looking after these kids, and these kids are walking the street. And quite often the kids are not bad kids, but they're bored out of their brains. They've got nothing to do, and it turns into things like this. So you've got kids as young as 8 and 10 years of age walking the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning looking for something to do.
Yeah. One of the things a lot of people need to realise, Alice Springs is in the middle of Australia, and it has only a population of just over 25,000.
It's very small. Yeah.
Really tiny. So when you get this type of a rampage of youths, and most of them are under the age of 18, that's a huge issue. That is a really big issue.
It's something like, believe it or not, it's actually something like 80 or 90% of the Aboriginal community that are youths in Alice Springs. There's a staggeringly high number of youths compared to the elders. So, because a lot of the elders in that community don't want this either. They don't want the violence. They're not inciting any of this. So they want it all to stop. It's more that sort of middle age, the parents of these kids that really are neglecting these children. And I know that's not every case, and there's going to be people out there that would argue the point, but it's a statistic. You can't argue with the statistics. So then you also got to bring into the equation, the white fella and the black fella have very different laws and rules around a lot of things, and they have a very strong revenge policy, this eye for eye sort of mentality. So when one family or one clan does something wrong, there's going to be revenge. It's inevitable, and they go beyond the eye for eye. So you've also got that mentality in that community as well. So every time you do something wrong by someone, you're going to get it tenfold.
Correct.
So
one of the big things in the earlier days was the elders played a big part in the community. They no longer do. They're not involved as much, which has been a very negative situation for the communities. Yeah.
I think statistically, given the number of elders, that's probably a big problem too. They can't control these kids. Like I said, it's 80 or 90% of the population, the Aboriginal population there are youths. So, then you've got everyone above 18 makes up 10 or 20% of the community. So there aren't a lot of elders. It's not like it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So, and these kids, their parents are TikTok and Google. Their parents aren't, you know what I mean?
Sadly, that's the parent for a lot of kids at the moment. Yeah.
So they have no interest in what they don't have any faith left in their own parents, their direct parents. Because they would rather walk the streets at 2 a.m. than go home and be sexually abused.
Yeah.
Can you blame them?
There's been a lot of studies where if there isn't a father figure in the relationship, that creates a lot of issues for the juveniles.
Absolutely. We know that from from America as well. They have similar
that's a big
sort of
problem.
issues.
You'll find a lot of the black crime in the US is based on a fatherless household.
Yeah. So, and then you've also got, there's a lot of youth centres and workers that, do a lot for the community, but there's also questions of how much of that money gets through to them, and then when it gets to them, how much of that gets through to the community. But since that funding was cut a few years ago, there's nothing for these kids to do. Nothing. There was an organisation, I think it was about 2018. There was an organisation that opened up where they started a youth centre. I think it ran 24 hours a day. I'd have to double check that, but I know it definitely ran through the night. So some of these kids that didn't want to go home had a safe space to go to at night time, just to hang out or sleep there if they felt that was a better way to go. But you can imagine being because these kids are, some of them, like I said, they're 7 and 8 years of age, walking the street. They've got a lot of energy and nothing to do with it. And can you blame a 9-year-old walking the street at 2 o'clock in the morning rather than getting home and being molested by their dad?
Correct. That's a big thing in the community. Just the domestic violence is just as bad.
Yeah.
It's,
it's
not
shocking.
worse. Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who have worked in those communities, and some of the experiences they've told me, I couldn't talk to you about them on YouTube because we'd get shut down.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too graphic, but walking the street and looking up an alley, and there's an Aboriginal elder doing things to a 10-year-old girl, and then offering to him, for $5 you can join me. That's. I don't know if it's as rife as that now. That was 15 years ago, but those communities are a mess.
Yeah.
Now I don't know whether you want to. I don't know. I'm not blaming the Aboriginals for their situation that they're in. You can blame white people for introducing alcohol. You can blame a million things, but it's like anything else. It was generations ago. There should be more being done to get these people on their feet. There should be more done in these communities, and the youth is the heart of these communities. And if we're not looking after the youth, we're not looking after anybody. And how do you expect kids to function like that in that environment? Of course, they're going to be aggressive and
oh, absolutely. And then it just gets carried over to all their mates.
Yeah.
They start hanging around and then end
Just
up
escalates.
in peer group.
Yeah. Now, I don't think these kids walk down the street going, "Oh, we're going to bash the first white guy we see." They're just kids. There are kids in white communities that go around and graffiti and bash and throw rocks, and they stand on a bridge of the freeway throwing rocks at cars as they drive under. It's not because they're Aboriginal, but you've got a high concentration of Aboriginal kids with nothing to do that don't want to go home. So that's what we need to be addressing. I mean, the big move to pull the Army and the ADF in there, back in 2007, it didn't fix a thing. That will never fix a thing. You can't rule with an iron thumb.
Hasn't Jacinta Price asked for the ADF again?
Yeah, but
and Anthony Albanese, for those of you who don't know, who happens to be our Prime Minister, he flew to Alice Springs last year, around May last year, and he was there for a total of 4 hours.
Yeah, and then spent 3 days at the tennis.
Yeah, exactly. Then he landed there, did his press tour, then buggered off again.
It's disgusting. It was a photo opportunity.
Exactly.
It's disgusting.
He said he was going to allocate $250 million.
Yeah.
There's no evidence to
it
this
hasn't
day.
happened yet.
It hasn't even happened.
Correct.
We're talking almost a year later and nothing.
Yep, totally.
Nothing.
So now we've got an extra 60 police officers that have now moved into Alice Springs in the last few days to try and keep things under control.
Yeah.
But the curfew, I mean, at the end of the day, a curfew is not going to do anything. You're putting a curfew on these kids for 2 weeks. Now, first of all, 2 weeks is going to do jack. We know that. They'll just sit at home and watch TV for 2 weeks.
And
But the worst part of this is you're pushing those kids right back into the environment that they shouldn't be in at home with abusive parents. It's like, oh, we know you're bashing up, destroying the streets and setting fires on that, but we can't allow that. So you need to stay at home where your dad's molesting you. I mean, come on, man. There's got to be a better solution. There's got to be a better solution than that. And 2 weeks of a curfew is not going to do anything.
I think during that curfew I think this is the second week of the curfew now.
Yeah.
In the first week of the curfew, on a good day, they still had 14 arrests.
Yeah.
On a good night, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean,
on a quiet
night.
Yeah.
That's still, in a population of 25,000, that's a lot of kids that are still out and about, causing havoc.
Yeah.
Obviously, trying to avoid going home. Many years ago, in my previous life, I used to be a DJ, and one of my gigs was actually in Darwin. And on the way to Darwin, we stopped at Alice Springs.
Yep.
I was there for a whole hour, and I never left the airport. So I never got to see, sadly, because I would have loved to have seen Alice Springs. And then when I got to Darwin, one of the big things I noticed is the Indigenous population. Coming from Melbourne around the year 2000, I think this was about 2001, I didn't see the integration of the Indigenous population. But in Darwin, they were everywhere. I'd go to a bank, they were behind the counter ready to help, They integrated so well. I couldn't believe it. It was just amazing. I loved it. And of course, at the bottom of my hotel, there was a park, and you had your, small size of Aboriginals that were boozing up. But generally speaking, the majority of the Indigenous people in Darwin, when I was there, they were absolutely amazing. They were always really friendly. Obviously, I was never scared of them. I never had anything to be scared of them. And like I said, it didn't matter where I went, we had the Indigenous population integrated in the community. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah.
I never got to see that in Melbourne. I rarely saw any of the Indigenous population, mainly because where I hung around. Also, I lived in Perth for quite a while, and I was a city boy, and just around that era, I just wasn't involved. And to see that in Darwin, it was just so enlightening. I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it. Yeah.
When was that?
About 2001, so 22 years ago.
Yeah,
and at that stage, I already heard about the issues they were having, because when I was DJing, a few of the security guys, they would tell me stories. There was this one particular chappie. He worked for a company that built the houses out in the outback for the Indigenous population. And the stories he was telling me is they would go out and they'll tear up the floorboards and use it for firewood.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way they lived. They didn't live in houses. They didn't want to live in those houses. So they would just tear them apart.
Yeah.
So they were approaching it the wrong way right from the start.
Yeah. Well, I think it was about 2000 and I might have been prior to that, not long before 2001, that they started the internment camps. There's like 15 or 16 internment camps positioned around Alice Springs where the Aboriginal communities have been moved to. And they're like, I don't know, they're like slums.
Yeah.
There's not much integration in that respect from what I understand. So I think the Aboriginal community of Alice Springs is about 30% of the population.
Okay.
It's not like it's 50-50, but still 30%. I mean, given statistically, how many Indigenous people there are in Australia, which is quite a small percentage, 30% is probably quite concentrated really in one area. So, but I don't know. I mean, the people there would speak better to that. I couldn't say, but I don't know how much integration there is as far as where they actually live. So I know that these interments is probably not the right word, but that's what they seem to appear to be. But yeah, I know they still exist. So, and they're basically Indigenous only zones, basically. So
well, let's have a quick look at a recent video that happened last week, and we had a bit of an issue where things got a bit crazy. The youth went a bit of on a rampage through Alice Springs.
Mate, they're taking 20-metre jumps and jumping in the glass trying to smash it.
Look at them all in the park.
Yeah.
Oh, she's got a brick.
Is that a taxi just pulled up in the background?
Big time. They've smashed through one door already. Mate, they're taking 20-metre.
This is literally like 5 days ago.
Yeah, that's right. These guys have a lot of faith in their glass. I've seen that. Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, I've seen the video. They're literally standing on the side of the glass going, he's throwing a rock.
All right, I'll actually play this video as well. This This is the gentleman you just heard his voice on the previous one. And he's pretty calm.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's got a lot of faith. That's the local tavern, by the way. Yeah.
Geez, some of those boys are doing a real run-up and giving it a full force, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, in 2020, the local police tried a new method where they blacklisted members of the community for alcohol, and so every day they would send out a text with a list of names and car registrations to all the bottle shops and alcohol outlets around Alice Springs. So if anybody on that list turned up, they weren't served. And that actually cut a lot of the alcohol-related violence down. But, yeah, whether they could look at doing something similar again, I don't know. But they've tried a lot of different things, and nothing ever really seems to work in the long term. They all kind of work in the short term. But even when they first started cutting out alcohol, burglaries and break-ins went through the roof because people were still addicted to alcohol and couldn't get alcohol. So the next thing was to break into somebody's house and steal their alcohol. So a lot more burglaries and break-ins took place. And like even that footage that you showed there is the local tavern, which is stocked with alcohol. So you may be wondering, why that shop? What did they do? Well, that's why. Because the next shop doesn't have alcohol. Well, that one does.
Talking about shops, there was last week there was 7 youths that broke into a sports shop, a camping store, and they stole multiple knives and crossbows, including weapons. The bolts for the crossbows. Now that changes the scenario completely. That looks like it could be dangerous any time. Yeah,
that's right. Well, actually, speaking of that, there's actually a couple of vigilante groups that have started up in Alice Springs. They're white guys, and they've started
Isn't he from Ireland or something? This dude? I think he's from Ireland.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Oh, yes, because he came from Belfast.
Right, and he's been in Alice Springs for 6 years.
Yeah. So he started a vigilante group, but he's training people to fight and use weapons. Yeah. So like
that's gonna go all sorts of wrong.
How's that going to end? Yeah. And then the most I guess one of the biggest interests for the youth there now, because so many of the youth centres have closed down, is there's a local boxing ring or boxing training centre that a lot of these kids go to learn to box. And the thought behind that was, to give them an outlet for energy and teach them some,
And that usually works. They did that in the Bronx.
But you've got to also be careful that you're getting a bunch of kids, teaching them how to fight and then giving them a bunch of weapons. It's just, it could be a recipe for disaster. You know what I mean?
The weapon's not a good idea. Boxing, it's not so bad because it kind of releases the anxiety.
But I had a friend many, many years ago who was in the army, and he went up there and had to do a stint in the army. And I think it might have even, was it around the 2007? No, it was later than that. Might have been about 2012. And, they had really, really strict regulations then with the army about the local Indigenous people, because what would happen is you'd be driving along the road and all of a sudden there'd be 5 Indigenous people standing in the middle of the road waving you down. They wouldn't be violent, but they would say, I'll give you $100 if you go and get me a slab, bloke. And then it's from, we're talking 2012, and they're like, oh, it's pretty tempting. And they drive into town, buy a slab and bring it out and give them the slab. So they had to actually put rules and things in place with the army that they'd be up on charges if they did anything like that. And they had to be very careful because a lot of as you mentioned before about the way they live and the way they were destroying houses to burn them for fires, they had a lot of warnings about driving at night because the Aboriginals would sleep in the middle of the road because the road was still warm from the sun during the day. So they'd sleep in the middle of the road. And you'd just be driving along minding your own business and all of a sudden... Not
a good feeling.
No. Yeah. So, that was always a concern as well.
Yeah.
So.
Many years ago, when the first time I moved to... the only time, but when I drove to Perth, I originally went over a 6-month contract working for Alan Bond. If you don't know who he is, he's the man that won the America's Cup.
Yeah, with his winged keel.
That's right. And I went to work as a DJ in one of his nightclubs there. And on the way there, I stopped at one of these servos on somewhere along the Nullarbor. It was in the middle of nowhere. And I'm standing there, I'm filling up, and this big four-wheel drive turns up, and there's a whole bunch of Indigenous people. I mean, there would have been easy 7 or 8 people on this two-seater car, and one of them sitting on the bonnet with his legs through where the windscreen was supposed to be. And that's how they turned up.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop cackling. It was so funny. It was great. I loved it. Yeah. They live free, don't they?
Oh, they
absolutely
do. Yeah.
free.
Look,
Yeah.
Peter Dutton a couple of years ago tried to implement a new plan where, you know, those kids that are suffering abuse and neglect at home would be taken from their homes almost, like a foster child sort of scenario, and put into homes where they could be looked after. But you know, the community lost their mind because they just saw another stolen generation coming. So
I was about to say
it
that,
got stopped basically. But that was an idea that he had. But my point to that is, I'm not saying that idea is right or wrong, but my point is that there's been so many different attempts in so many different ways to rectify this problem. And I think, every one of them has good intentions. I don't think anyone has done any of these things maliciously, but one of the things that they always fail to do is to sit down with the Aboriginal community and talk to them about what they actually need. To roll the army and the ADF in there and start arresting people and locking them up, and I'm sure there are people that will need to be locked up for some of the things that they're doing to these children, and I'm sure there's some of the kids that will need to be locked up because they're going too far. But to just march the army in and start throwing your weight around in a black community, Aboriginal community, without consulting them first and saying, what is it you actually need us to do, I think is a big mistake. And history has shown over the decades that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. They need to sit down with the elders and the people in these communities. In fact, I think that youth centre I mentioned before might have actually been in Kalgoorlie, not in Alice Springs, and it's been quite successful. So, they need to sit down with the communities and say, what do you actually need us to do? What do you think will work? Because obviously whatever we've done hasn't worked. So let's consult with you.
Jacinta Price, the Minister of Alice Springs, she keeps on wanting to talk to people, but no one seems to respond.
Just ignoring her.
She's forever trying to get on shows and say, hey, we need help. This is an Australian problem. It's not just an Alice Springs problem.
Yeah.
We need help from all over the country.
Yeah.
And yet she doesn't seem to get any type of help.
Well, see, a big, like last week, that big riot was, all over the news for 24 hours and it was gone again.
Yeah.
But it's not just Alice Springs. There's other pockets around the country that have the same issues. In Queensland, WA, it's all over the place. There were small pockets with the same problems, and their crime rate is phenomenally high, and they have the exact same issues, exact same problems at home, stemming from alcohol and drug abuse. So, I'm not saying there's a blanket solution for any of it, but it just shows that it's not localised to one area where they're having a specific problem in that specific town. It's a common problem in common towns. Maybe they need to sit down with the Aboriginal community and say, how do we address this? And then we could apply that to all of those areas.
Yeah, but I think it's a problem that has a lot of nuance. And you've got to, like you said, you've got to sit down and talk about these issues. They're not general. These issues don't apply, for instance, for similar issues in Melbourne, because they handle differently, or be it Brisbane or Sydney, whatever. These are specific to Alice Spring and the surrounding areas.
Well, there's other, like I said, there's other states where they're predominantly, well, not predominantly, but there's a very high concentration of Indigenous people. Those are the areas that we're seeing similar issues all around the country.
Yeah.
So
Well, hopefully we can solve it pretty quickly. I've got some more part of the violent riots from last week in Alice Springs. This was Tuesday last week, apparently, March 27th. So let's have a look at that one. Security video, so I don't think it has sound. I used to
They
do
take
it.
20 metre jumps, jumping in the glass, trying to smash it.
Oh, she's got a brick.
Oh, fucking hell.
This is basically an extended version of what we saw.
It's escalated big time. They've smashed through one door already. Here goes again.
No fear whatsoever. They're just
No.
getting stuck into it.
No. Well, see, even if they get caught, the sentences are so minimal.
Yeah. They're so confident that nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go, the outside footage. You see the guy in the yellow shorts run up?
They get some air, don't they?
Oh,
There's one guy that runs up, he's halfway up the door.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look at him, full force.
But see, there's another town in WA called Carnarvon. Have you heard of Carnarvon?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
That's north.
that's got north up almost on the water. That's got a bad reputation as well. Very similar, very high crime, high concentration of Indigenous people. That's where a couple of years ago a young girl went missing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Chloe Smith was her name, young girl. So that they made the news when that happened. But I think it was I think it was after that there was an Aboriginal guy that stabbed somebody, murdered somebody, and that made the news. And they basically tried to say that because he'd grown up in an Indigenous community that his level of intelligence was that of a 4-year-old. I'm like, how insulting. But that was the case they tried to put forward to try and get him off.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But he went to the scene already armed, and when he left he hid the weapon and he did all these things that showed that he was cognitively fine, not impaired in any way. But yeah, so those couple of cases made the news. And that's what happens, is little things make the news, like this thing from last week. But there's a deeper underlying problem that's been going on for decades. And
no one does anything about it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we see it makes the news because it sells, advertising, but they don't actually go back and really investigate it.
Yeah.
I think ABC's tried a couple of times and they've sent reporters in there,
Yeah.
but I think it kind of looks like it's half-hearted done.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not properly done at all.
Not a photo opportunity.
No, and they'll wait for the next incident and then it'll make the news.
Again,
but the thing is, this is starting to get international coverage. One of the first videos I showed you was uploaded by Ian Miles Chong, and he does a lot of political stuff in the US, and he picked that one up.
Yeah, good.
So he's trying to push it out. So
Good.
hopefully it'll shine some type of light on there. Yeah, it needs it. And all I can say, Jacinta Price, keep battling it.
Keep slogging along. We're behind her every way we can be. I mean, I think it was Jacinta Price in Parliament House who said that we're all focused on this. What's the speech that we all have to give now about the land? We honour the.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We honour the this.
Yeah.
And she said, you're all happy to say that, but no one's actually willing to try and do anything to help the community.
Mm.
So yeah,
and also that other politician, I think, is Mundine. Do you know that guy?
Anthony Mullen.
Yeah, Anthony. Yeah, he's really good as well. He really pushes the community.
Yeah.
He knows where to go, and I think you need to get both of them in the same room and really slog it out and work it out.
Yeah.
Because those
Get
two,
him here.
I'd love to.
How good
I would
would that
absolutely
be?
love to. If you're
Let's
watching,
see what we can do.
Yeah, Mr. Mundine.
Yeah.
Mundine. Please, we would love to have you on the
Jacinta,
show.
we'd love to have you both here.
Absolutely, love to have a chat with you. We have a spare chair opposite me.
Yep.
Right here.
You might have to share it. That could be great. No, we'll put a cage between them. They'll be right. But I can imagine those two in a room together.
Is Anthony Mundine the boxer?
Yeah.
No, that's not the guy I'm talking about. There's another.
Wasn't he an Aboriginal boxer? Do you know what I mean?
What are you talking about? A gazillion years ago?
Yeah. Is that who you're talking about? Who are you talking about then?
I'm trying to look him up now. Sorry. No, I should have been a bit more prepared on that one. Because he often has his Aboriginal name on there, and my apologies, I just can't pronounce it. I can't find it now. But I'm sure he goes on the name of Mundine.
We're talking about
as
two
well.
different people.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the first time we've done that.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, so Jacinta's point was, that we all do this speech, but does anybody even really... The people that are saying these things, do any of them actually really care about what they're saying?
Isn't it like acknowledging the previous owners?
The elders past and present and future.
That's right. Yeah.
And she's like, well, we all say that, but...
Do they do it interstate or is it a Melbourne thing?
No, I think it's right around the country.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm sure it's national.
Yeah, right.
But a lot of... Like South Australia have dropped it. They don't... doing it.
I remember seeing that, yeah. It was only just recent, wasn't it? Like
Correct, a month or two ago. Yeah.
Very recent. So I just
Well,
thought
there you go.
what might be interesting is actually if we have a look at the crime rates around the world compared to Alice Springs.
Sure,
Now,
sure we're up there somewhere.
Yeah. Now remember, Alice Springs has a population of just over 25,000. Where would you think we are on the ladder of being dangerous?
Are we talking
The whole world.
per capita though, or are we talking
No,
actual incidents?
I don't know how they do it. They've got they call it an index, and
So it's per capita.
That's right.
We'd
I
probably
guess so.
be reasonably high. Alice Springs would be reasonably high. I think Alice Springs would be the highest in Australia.
Correct.
And I'd say we're probably fairly high. We're probably in the top 20, 30.
Yeah, between 20 and 30.
Okay.
Very close. Yeah. Thank God we're below Salvador in Brazil, and underneath Johannesburg, so we're not quite that bad.
Yeah.
Alice Springs is at 26, and this is the whole world. And what they call it, the crime index, which is at 70.2, and the safety index is 29.8. So the lower the number, the less safe you are in the town. And this is the thing, when you scroll down, we're above, Alice, not us, but Alice Springs is above cities like Mexico and Chicago, of all places, Al Capone.
I guess that's 100 years ago.
Well, true.
We've had some gentrification since then, I think, but yeah.
New Orleans, Lagos in Nigeria, all above those. That's just crazy.
I wouldn't have thought Houston, Texas would be up there.
Well, number 46, it's in a better position than Alice Springs are.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah. Well, it was so surprising when I had a look at that. Again, I'm talking about a population of 25,000, some of these other cities have got millions in there. And they're still safer. Anyway, on that note...
There you go.
Seriously, guys, we need to sort out this issue in Alice Springs. It's just not safe.
No.
Yeah.
It's not even... there's that, but it's also, for the Indigenous community. It's not even just about our safety or anyone's safety. It's about resolving this. It's
a vicious circle, isn't it?
It is. People like Jacinta have been crying out for years for help with this, and it falls on deaf ears.
And those children that are kicking the door of the pub, they're going to become abusive.
Oh, it's an ongoing cycle. It's an ongoing cycle. But at the same time, like I said, you can't blame them for not wanting to go home. Yeah,
correct. You just got to break that cycle somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert. Far from it. We can just sit here and comment and make sure people are aware of it. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, we can tell you what's happening. Yeah. We can't tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
That's for the big wigs.
Exactly. That's with people far bigger brains than us. All right. Let's alleviate the tension or the atmosphere in here. And let's go to the movies. Brand new movie starting up in about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. It's called Civil War. Now, it's based on an alternative USA where, they end up in a civil war, Let's have a look at the trailer.
People of Florida aligned. And the Western forces of Texas and California will be welcomed back to these United States as soon as their illegal secessionist government is deposed.
You don't know what side they're fighting for.
Someone's trying to kill us. We are trying to kill them.
they're whistling that little tune there. It looks amazing. I think it looks like a great movie. But do you think they're going to take sides? Do you think they're going to pitch Conservatives against, Democrats? Because it looks like it's going to be a war between patriots and the non-patriots.
It's hard to say, isn't it? I think they're going to go down the path of, like you said, patriots.
Yeah.
And
if they don't take a side and just try and show both issues, or issues that don't involve A and B, as in parties, it might be a great movie. But if they do, it's going to be a very controversial movie.
Yeah, interesting.
April 12th.
If they make it about political parties, it'll be a shit fight.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In the shorter trailer, they didn't show you the bit where they come across this. It's sort of like a.
He's an immigrant.
No, he's not an immigrant. I don't think he's an immigrant.
I'm thinking.
It's the character by Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, but
he's the character.
I'm pretty sure.
And he plays like a patriot. And it these two. Are you talking the main character? Maybe an immigrant.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there was a scene where there's guys in camo, and there's another guy.
That's right.
And that other guy, I'm sure, is an immigrant.
Yeah, and he says, "I'm American."
Yeah.
And the patriot goes, "What type of American are you?"
Yeah.
As soon as I heard that, I thought, okay, are they really going to get stuck into patriots and things like that? So that's the only thing that had me worried about the whole scenario. But otherwise, it's a great topic to be talking about at the moment, or even showing it, because of what's happening in the US.
The timing is impeccable.
Brilliant, yeah. Let's hope they don't turn this into a propaganda movie, where they really get stuck into Republicans or anything like that. Entertain us. Or else,
it could turn into a bloodbath.
Hopefully you watched last week's episodes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But I think the timing is perfect for it at the moment. It's made by a company called A24. They've made a whole truckload of fantastic movies recently. A lot of them have been horror movies as well. So, main actress in this, Kirsten Dunst. And she's been in a truckload of movies, that lady.
Yep.
She's really good, been around since 1989. One of her early movies has been Interview with the Vampire. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was the little girl that got turned into a vampire and never aged. And
right.
And she was upset because she was like 6 years old for the rest of her life.
As a 6-year-old.
Yeah. And her mind had become an old adult, but because she looked like a kid, no one wanted to get involved with her. I guess she's not in Hollywood at the right time then. Sorry. One of her early movies, Interview with the Vampire. She also made Bring It On, one of my favourite movies about cheerleaders. That is awesome. That's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's got some great performances in there, the routines that they do. And I think they've had like 69 different sequels since then. And they're all rubbish. Yeah. Absolutely rubbish as they are. Spider-Man. She did all the 3 Spider-Mans.
Yep.
First 3.
That's right.
And one of her credits is Black Mirror. Now, she's actually uncredited in it, but she did appear in it.
Which episode?
I think it was the USS Callister. That's it. Do you remember that episode?
Not specifically.
It's the Star Trek episode.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, that has a link with the other actor who's that patriot, Jesse Plemons. Now, I love Jesse Plemons. He's been in a lot of great movies. His biggest role would have been, not his biggest, but his most popular probably would have been Breaking Bad. And I think it was in like a full season or 2 seasons, 16, 17 episodes. And he played this really vicious guy. in one particular episode, I think they're hiding drugs or something, or they're doing a transition of drugs. This young kid on a motocross bike rides underneath the bridge and looks at him, and Jesse Plemons sees him and blows him away.
Wow.
He was vicious, really vicious. And I think he lasted right up to the last episode of the season. So I'm assuming that was the last 2 seasons he was in. So, like I just said with Kirsten Dunst and the connection she has with Jesse Plemons, is he was the main character in that Black Mirror episode.
Okay.
USS Callister. He played the captain.
Right.
And what the USS Callister was a computer game.
Yep.
It was a virtual reality, and he was the commander of this ship. And what it was doing, it was taking your soul and putting it into the game. So you would appear in the game as yourself, and you would have to take on the role. But the real you is still in the real world.
Yep.
It's taking the exact copy of you and put it into this game.
Okay.
And it's probably the best episode of Black Mirror.
Yep.
It's a
Is
real.
that the one where they're doing martial arts at the start of it? No, that's another one.
No.
That's just. I'm not sure which. One of the first episodes of one of the seasons. The 2 of them are doing Mortal Kombat, basically martial arts fighting.
Oh yes, that sounds familiar. Yeah, because this episode is a real. I wouldn't say a rip-off, but it's a real tribute to Star Trek.
Yeah.
Same looking interior of the spaceship, everything.
Awesome.
Loved it. And he's been around a long time as well, 1998, 64 movie credits. Majority of his early career was TV. He did things like Walker, Texas Ranger, Judging Amy, CSI. So I'm assuming if you're in CSI, you have to be in NCSI as well.
Probably.
So he was in that as well. He's one of the first movies he was in was Paul. Remember that one? About that alien?
Oh, yeah.
That was a great movie. Loved it. Then he was in Battleship, which was based on that game, which that was rubbish.
Yep.
And like I said, Black Mirror, one of the last ones was Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay.
He played an FBI agent in that one.
Long ago.
Yeah, that was good. That was a really, really good movie. I enjoyed it. Long, I think it was almost 3 hours, if I remember rightly. My buddy Robert De Niro, who wants to punch Trump in the face. He was in it. He's good. I like him as an actor, but he's a nutcase, that guy. Yeah. So go and check it out. I'm going to have a look at it. Once I see it, we might even do a review on it. See what it was like. Let you know. See if I enjoyed it. If there's lots of stuff being blown up, I'll probably enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. It comes out on my birthday, so I might.
Oh, really? Yeah. So what are you? 28?
Yeah. Again.
Yeah.
28 every year.
20. Seriously, I feel I'm still 28.
I've been 28 every year for years.
Yeah, for about 20 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 30. No.
And on that note, now that we're reliving our youth, for me, reliving my youth is like for the 40th time.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for joining us for this episode 6, I believe.
Episode 6, yeah.
We'll catch you next time once we find some crazy news during the week again. And by the way, if you've got Bitcoin, it's going through the roof. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah. And
actually, we're not going yet because I just thought of something. I literally saw an interview with a dude that did this interview 2 years ago, and he said Bitcoin was going to drop to 0. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So at the moment, it's at a record high.
I keep following the wrong people because I put it in when they tell me to put it in, and then I lose money. And then I take it out when they tell me to take it out, and I lose even more money. And I'm like, I'm following the wrong people, obviously. So, if anyone's got any really hot tips.
Look, we are not financial advisors.
Not even remotely.
Yeah, not even close. But what I did do was, we were signing off, weren't we? Anyway, I digress.
That's right.
I digress. Okay. One of the things I did do was I got into crypto only a few years ago, and I bought it just before it hit its peak. But then it hit its peak, it dropped. 2 years, it just went in the toilet. I think Bitcoin went from about 76, maybe 80, down to 23, and I bought it at 80. So one thing at least I knew was not to sell, buy on the dip. So I kept on buying on the dip. So when it jumped up again, I had a bit of, a great bounce back. Now it's at record high. So I recovered. But boy, that was stressful times for those couple of years. Yeah, very stressful. And I've had a couple of mates who've been talking about, buying Bitcoin. And I literally, one of them said I should buy some when it was at its lowest at 23,000, whatever. That's Australian, by the way. 23,000. He never did. And kicking himself. Absolutely kicking himself. Yeah.
I'll bet. There's an Aussie guy that does a show where he talks about finances. Yeah. But his focus is America. And so he's always got an American audience and he talks to them about everything. But I was following him for a little while, pardon me, and I did what he said and I lost thousands. So I won't reveal his name, but he probably knows who he is.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
-1 subscriber here.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, well, no one's going to get it right. Well, I don't think so. There's who's that analyst on, is it at CNN or something? Or MSNBC? He gets everything wrong. So basically whatever he says,
you do the
opposite. And on that note, we are going for sure this time. Thank you very much for joining us. Grumpy signing off and
Pinky. See you next week.
Ciao.